about how to dispute an appraisal, but better yet, what to do before we even get to that point. And I'll tell you why it's so important to try to get to that point. First of all, my name is Colin Niebuhr. I've been a certified appraiser for 18 years. I've been the executive director and compliance manager of Charis Management Group, which is an appraisal management company. I would normally ask here how many people know what an appraisal management company is, but I'll just assume that y'all don't. So what we do is our client, who is in this case is Movement Mortgage, they send their appraisal assignments to us. We find the best appraiser for that particular assignment, and then we assign to them. They complete it, they send it back to us, we do a quick review, and then we send it on to our client. What is unique about Charis Management Group, we are on the East Coast, but we have on the Pacific Coast, as you can see, we're open from 9 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. your time. We are very good at getting our appraisals back in 5 business days or less. With the COVID virus, there was a little bit of a hiccup there for a couple months, but trying to get the modified appraisals with Fannie Mae and FHA, but I think we've got a handle of that now. But what's unique about us, so I don't know how many of y'all know how philanthropic Movement Mortgage is. They give millions of dollars a year to charities and nonprofits and do so much in the areas that they do business. Well, Charis was founded in the same image as Movement Mortgage. So we were founded to give back. So we do give back 99% of our profits to charities and nonprofits at the end of each month. And we are owned by the National Christian Foundation. What else is unique about Charis? If that slide will come up. I hope it comes up. Can you get that? There we go. So almost our entire panel, which is just over 2,900 appraisers nationwide. We're only in 16 states, but we have 2,900 appraisers on our panel. And almost all of those, over 98% of those appraisers are from referrals from real estate agents. So we don't just try to find the cheapest appraisers or anyone who just wants to sign up for us. We were founded back in 2012. And we try, when we go into an area, we try to get referrals from loan officers, from real estate agents, and we contact those appraisers. Why would an appraiser want to work for us? We've always believed that a happy appraiser is a good appraiser. We pay appraisers faster than any other AMC in the country, between 2 to 7 days. We pay every Thursday. So regardless of if we've gotten paid for the order or not, we keep our appraisers happy by paying them quickly when other AMCs kind of have trouble doing that sometimes. We are always monitoring our panel for quality. We want to hear the positive and the negative feedbacks. If you meet an appraiser out at a home for an inspection and they were not professional, or they were, we would love to know. We really want to know all the good and bad of your experiences with our appraisers. They represent us, they represent Movement, and so we are constantly monitoring that. So, and it says I control your screen, Andy, but I don't believe it. It's just on a bad delay. Can you go down one? Did you have to do that?
I just clicked it, yeah.
Okay. So assigning the orders. So how do we assign orders? Our software, the way it's built, you're not going to have some horror story of an appraiser coming from like Riverside to do an appraisal in Los Angeles or San Diego or something like that. The way our software is designed, when we get an order, we have in every appraiser's profile the address that they would want us to use, whether it's their home address or their office address. And when we get an assignment, our software automatically calculates linear miles from that office or home to the subject property. So our appraisers, we might have 20 or 30 appraisers like on a list for that particular property, and they will show up in order. So the first appraiser will be the closest, and then so on and so on and so on. So we can't guarantee geographical competency by that, but it certainly helps a lot when we know that we're assigning orders and keeping our appraisers within 2 to 8 miles or so is what our goals are. And the more, obviously, the more dense the area, the closer we have a lot of options of appraisers. We're always monitoring our panel, turnaround time, and then current volume. If we have an appraiser that has 5 or 6 orders with us right now, we might skip over them to give the order to the next appraiser in line that might have fewer, just to try to work on that turn time to keep that under 5 days. We also offer rush appraisals that are 3 days. Click. So we're going to get back, we're going to get down to it. This is what y'all are here for. So what is an appraisal? An appraisal is an unbiased estimate of market value, the most probable sale price based on an analysis of the subject property using 3 approaches to value: the sales comparison, the cost, and the income approaches. Since the sales comparison approach is what lenders, what underwriters use to make their decisions as far as approving or declining a loan, we're going to focus on the sales comparison approach today. Click. This is not working. So what's the best line of defense when it comes to anything? Well, a good offense. What do I mean by that? So try to visualize in your area that you do business an established neighborhood, a neighborhood that perhaps has an assortment of homes built in the 1960s or 1970s, not some cookie cutter neighborhood where all the homes look the same, but a home where there's an assortment of styles and ages and renovations and such. So get that in your mind. Keep in mind, so let's say that whatever the neighborhood is that you're visualizing right now, let's say that I'm an appraiser who's been appraising in that particular area for the past 18 years. So question from anybody? So let's say I'm an appraiser that's been appraising in that particular area for 18 years. Giving away my secrets again. Even though I'm very comfortable doing appraisals in that area, I'm only going in 1 or 2 homes a year, maybe 3 or 4 homes a year. And I'm only going in the homes that I'm actually appraising, my subject properties. So if you're a buyer's agent, can we get back to that other screen at all? Andy? Andy?
This isn't working like we thought.
Delay.
Excuse me, sorry. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it just won't let me do it. I see my
Okay.
So we're on that.
Oops.
Oh.
There you go.
Okay.
Now you're on it.
All right. So, as I said before, so let's say I'm an appraiser that I'm very comfortable doing appraisals in that particular neighborhood that you're visualizing right now. I'm only inspecting the inside of the home that I'm actually appraising, and I'm only going to get maybe a couple of appraisals a year in that particular neighborhood. So as a listing agent, maybe you're going in all the other homes that are listed in that area, or as a buyer's agent, when all those other homes in the neighborhood are up for sale, you're going in those. So you have valuable expertise, valuable information for an appraiser when you're going to speak to them about your listing or whenever you meet with the appraiser for the subject property for the appraisal that they're doing. So keep in mind that MLS is not going to say, hey, we have 8-foot popcorn ceilings, come see our house. They don't talk about the imperfections. MLS is designed to sell the home, so they talk about all the positives, but the negatives are just as important. So the functionality of a home, if it has some kind of funky flow to it or something like that, or the quality and condition, and we're going to talk about quality and condition coming up, which is very important and often overseen. It's a huge oversight when people are looking and reading an appraisal, is the quality and condition adjustments, and I'll speak at length about that coming up. But the function, and I'm going to show you some photos. You've already seen them a couple times, but I'm just going to give some examples about. So it's not all about just the granite countertops and the hardwood floors and all the renovations that someone's done. The appraiser isn't going to miss the granite countertops. They're not going to miss the hardwood floors. But what if they're going to use a comp, or they're going to consider a comp that might have some adverse conditions to it? Let's pretend this is a typical MLS photo, not a very good one, but let's just pretend that's an MLS photo. But the next photo shows a completely different story, if we can get to it. Yeah, so that's a huge marketability factor right there if you have a water tower or anything like that behind your property. So if the appraiser is using this particular house as a comp, don't you think that he needs to know about the water tower, and when he or she is going by the house and they just take a quick picture and then they're taking some notes, they might miss that. There's some additional photos I'd like to show that are even more subtle. So there's another perhaps MLS photo. Oops. But then you have the cell tower right next door. These are adverse marketability factors that really need to be addressed by the appraiser. You also have, what if your home has a nice flat driveway, and the appraiser's using these homes as a comp? Well, these are adverse conditions that need to be addressed.
OMG with that driveway.
Yeah. So these are things that the appraiser needs to address when they're choosing their comps. If our home has a nice flat driveway, I'm going to skip to my favorite photo, which is this one right here. I don't know how many people can see my cursor, but this is the backyard to this house. So every other home in this subdivision has a nice, large, flat backyard, but this particular house, hey kids, go in the back alley and play. That's a huge marketability factor. So if the appraiser is driving by the front of this house, which is way over by the slideshow, if the appraiser is driving by the front of the house, takes a quick picture and goes about their business, if this is a $350,000, $400,000 price point, that's probably a $50,000 adjustment easy. The functionality of that home is just not like all the other homes in the neighborhood.
So Colin, can I just interrupt really quick? So in terms of rebuttals, and in terms of getting an appraisal report, for instance, where maybe value isn't favorable, or it's not what the contract price is. These are all tips and tricks to think about and look at when you're really looking at these appraisal reports, you guys. Look at the comps, and if you know something that the appraiser failed to mention or didn't see or whatever, that could be a key point in getting your rebuttal and getting the appraisal turned over.
That's exactly right. So
what's that?
To come back to something else. Somebody tells you it's $2, it's in the slide, $2.
I can't understand.
Okay.
So that's exactly right, and I'm glad Andy slowed me down there. So what these are examples of is when I mention the best offense or the best defense is a good offense. This is information I want in a packet, or when the appraiser calls you to schedule the appointment for the inspection. Have a packet ready for them, how you priced the house, or as the buyer's agent, what comps you think you are the best ones and the worst ones, the ones that you think the appraiser is going to consider that they shouldn't, like a home that has a water tower right behind it, or something like that. So what I want first is a packet with great information, and the appraisers more and more are accepting of this information. Years ago, the mentality was, leave me alone, I know how to do my job. But the newer appraisers coming in, they're much more accepting of information, realizing that any information that you can give them can only help them analyze better, make their reports stronger. So feel free to talk to an appraiser. The only thing you can't talk to an appraiser about is a value. You can't pressure them about value. But the Home Valuation Code of Conduct, which came out years and years ago, scared everybody. The only intent of that was that loan officers could not speak to appraisers, which now the HVCC doesn't even exist anymore. But it was never intended to be between appraisers and real estate agents. Real estate agents could always talk to appraisers, and you have every right to. So just keep that in mind, that if you want to have a discussion with the appraiser, you're not violating any kind of compliance issues whatsoever.
So Colin, I have a question. So before you even have to get your rebuttal, it's our policy to provide, particularly if it's a neighborhood that has, kind of set boundaries, to provide at the time of the appraisal some comps. And you guys look at that. Do you really review those, or is it annoying? What's your feeling?
No, I definitely think advised to, if you want to provide the MLS sheets of the comps that you use to price with some notes on the MLS sheets. But it's not just the ones that you use to price, it's also the ones that you you are concerned that the appraiser is going to consider, or you know that they're going to at least consider, and then why the appraiser should not consider them. So an appraisers are going to, when they search for comps, it's all about what are the best comps. So let's say they have 10 comps to choose from. Well, they're going to try to determine what are the best 4 or 5 out of this 10. So those other 5 of the 10 that they're not considering, or they're considering but they're not going to use, help them out. So say, yeah, you shouldn't use this one because there's a water tower behind it, or most of the homes in this neighborhood have backyards and this one does not. This comp down this that just recently sold down the street doesn't have a backyard. So it's what I've always seen in the past is what the agents use to price the property, and that's great, but also kind of defend, go on the offensive and defend why some comps shouldn't be used, or some sales, I should say, shouldn't be used in the report, and why there's better ones out there is all I'm saying.
I think
Okay.
that's huge.
Shouldn't be considered annoying at all.
Okay.
I think that's a key point. Provide the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that there's a balance, and you've got a valid argument, right?
That's right.
So can I just ask a quick question? Colin, is it standard that when an appraiser shows up to a listing that they will have already compiled their comps, or is it more their protocol, they come to the property, look at it, and then they do their research for their comps? I'm just curious, like, how much they come in knowing. I know there's no one size fits all, but just generally.
Yeah, great question. I think that it depends on the complexity of the appraisal. On unique properties, I think a lot of appraisers go to the property first, see what they have, and then they do their inspection, and then they'll go back and dig up comps. But in neighborhoods and subdivisions where a lot of the homes are very similar, they will look at the MLS, obviously the subject property, and then they'll kind of guess what the best comps likely are. And so they'll take those out with them, perhaps to save a second trip out to that particular area. And they'll take like maybe 8 or 10 MLS sheets of possible comps with them, and take all those photos. And then when they come back and they're typing up the appraisal report, they'll try to decide what are the best ones out of these 8 or 10. But oftentimes, for example, let's say the home was built in 1975, and there's a pool in the back, or something, some kind of surprise that the appraiser didn't know about when they saw the MLS. They're basically starting from scratch. They'll inspect the property, go back to their office, and start digging up more comps. Or maybe they put on an addition, and the square footage that the appraiser thought the property was, let's say 2,000 square feet, it's actually 2,400 or 2,600 square feet. So they will guess. They'll guess what they, but a lot of times they're surprised. So they're starting from scratch once they get back to their office. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much.
And concern. Thanks, Nicole. So,
hey, Colin, I don't know if you're going to talk about this at the end, but I just wanted to know what adjustments you guys might be making to appraisals during COVID. And I don't mean like physically entering the property. I mean, are you going to have to go further back in time a little bit to look at when there were more sales? So if you're going to talk about this later, I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to find out how you guys are going to handle it.
That's an excellent question. With the COVID, we do have, as far as going back, we have not seen that fear yet of value issues. We're definitely not. This is usually the time of year where we see more value issues anyways, because it's springtime, the market's supposed to be hot, and appraisers are using comps from like winter and last fall. So typically this time of year, we see more value issues than any other time of the year, but we're not seeing those yet. We're definitely well under any kind of like value issues and number of rebuttals that we had 12 months ago. But as you're saying, as there's fewer and fewer sales because there aren't as many buyers or not as many people putting their homes on the market.
Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering if you feel like you've got to, because my understanding is you guys look at about a 3-month period if you're going to have to go back further. And maybe that's not true. So dispel my myth.
Well, ideally, appraisers would love to just have all their comps within 3 months, but I rarely see that. Um, Appraisers will start with a specific search criteria when they're in MLS, and that also depends on the market. It depends on how unique the property is, how urban, suburban, or rural that property is. There's many factors that determine what the appraiser search criteria is going to be. Obviously, if you're in a rural area, it's probably a waste of time to start with a 90-day window. But appraisers will typically start, in most areas, they'll probably start with 6 months, but then if they see a lot of comps within 6 months, they'll shrink it. So appraisers generally, they only go as far out as they need to find what they're looking for. So there used to be, especially with FHA, they used to have a 1 mile radius. No matter what, I don't care what's happening, stay within 1 mile, but cooler heads prevailed and kind of, after a lot of debates and arguments with appraisers explained to FHA that, well, you might have a really good comp that's just 1.2 miles away, but you're making to use homes that are nothing like the style of the subject property that are just a half a mile away. So we finally turned that around. So that 1 mile thing is definitely a myth now, or at least no longer, they no longer enforce that. But I would say appraisers typically, they start around the 6 month window time frame, and then they go from there. Whether they have a lot of comps to choose from, they might shrink it. If they don't have what they're looking for, they're going to expand to 12 months. USPAP, which is basically our 2-inch thick manual, our appraisal Bible, allows appraisers to go back 36 months. They just can't, if a comp is older than 12 months though, the appraiser cannot use it in comps on the first page of the grid page, which we'll see here shortly, which is comps 1, 2, and 3. It has to be comps 4, 5, or 6. But if you just while we're on that subject, if you do work in an area that's USDA or FHA prevalent, when you're pricing your property, keep in mind that one of the criteria that FHA still goes by is that 2 comps have to be within 90 days. So they might not even be great comps, and the appraiser might put more of their weight on the older comps when they add those in. But just keep in mind that they do have to add at least 2 comps that closed within 90 days of the effective date of the appraisal. So when you're performing a CMA, it's probably a good idea to keep that in mind. Again, that's only in areas where FHA and USDA are prevalent. But we're just not seeing that shortage of comps just yet. But we'll see what things are going to be like in July or August, or even later, if there's truly a real limitation of comps. You're likely just gonna see more and more comps that in appraisal reports that are 8 months old, 10 months old, up to 12 months old. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting thing to see. While we're talking about the effect of the virus, I do want everyone to know that we did when everyone started working from home and this virus became prevalent everywhere, we did send out instructions to appraisers to let homeowners know exactly what they would be doing. We advised them, tell the homeowner before you do the inspection, if it's an occupied home, to have all the lights on, all the doors open. We're really trying to limit the contact that the appraiser has in the property. But we also have these modified appraisals where oftentimes, most of the time, these sales, they qualify for either a desktop appraisal or an exterior only appraisal. So if there's someone at high risk in the home, then it's probably a good idea just to get one of these. They're really kind of enhanced desktop appraisals and enhanced exterior only appraisals, where in the past, if an appraiser did a desktop or a drive-by, they never spoke to anybody. They just did the report. But these modified Fannie Mae and FHA reports, the appraiser is still supposed to talk to the agent or talk to the homeowner about perhaps any repairs or renovations that they've done to the property. So keep that in mind, that even if you ask Andy, for instance, hey, the homeowner is elderly, can we do a drive-by or a desktop? And actually yesterday, Andy said, well, yeah, that's fine. You can do one, but just please reach out to the homeowner because they did $150,000 in renovations. That's why the appraiser needs to be reaching out. So any other question on that?
Thanks, Colin.
All right, yes, ma'am. All right, so let's just say, for instance, oh, where are we? All right, so let's just say, for instance, the packet that the incredible packet that you presented to the appraiser didn't work out. The reason we really want to get ahead of the game and have that packet for the appraiser is, I don't know how many of y'all have ever had any kind of value issues, but I don't know if you've ever tried to pick up the phone and talk to an appraiser after you read the appraisal report, but by law, once the appraiser turns the report into their client, they are no longer allowed to talk to anybody but their client. So if you've ever been hung up on, or an appraiser has politely said, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you now, please contact your lender, the loan officer. That's why they're not allowed to talk to anyone but their client once they turn that report in. So now that's when we have to complete this rebuttal process. So I see all kinds of rebuttals that just don't really do the trick. And what the rest of this presentation is supposed to be for is to help you complete a proper rebuttal that appraisers are really going to pay attention to. So what is a good rebuttal? Well, obviously what we're looking for is either comps that the appraiser missed, or other errors or mistakes in the appraisal report. And we're going to go through all those. So why I have tax record GLA right here, tax record GLA is never going to work. The tax record GLA, at least where I'm from and where most of the areas that we do business, it's just usually incorrect. The appraiser hand measures the property. Most appraisers use lasers now. So they're probably going to be right. They're trained to measure homes, and tax records they just a lot of times the tax assessor will just stand at the street and just kind of judge it a little bit. Maybe it doesn't have the renovations, the additions or whatever added to the square footage. So if you're going to argue GLA in a rebuttal, it really needs to be from a prior appraisal, from when the homeowners purchased the home and they have a copy of their appraisal, or if you had the property measured before you listed it, something like that. In my region, we have this company called Steel Tape Measuring, and they're incredible. And a lot of agents list homes before they list the home, they have it measured professionally. Something like that is what you really want to go by. Appraisers, when they measure a home, they measure the outside walls, except with the condo. With condos, they measure from the inside walls because obviously it's a different ownership. They only own that interior space. Appraisers are going to cut out 2-story living rooms, 2-story foyers. They're going to cut out the garage, as we saw in that first photo. This is working well now.
Sorry.
So they hand measure. So if you think that the gross living area, if the square footage is off, just keep in mind that tax record square footage, the appraiser's eyes are probably going to glaze over. So it needs to be from a professional source. So here's the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report. This is also known as the 1004 form. So this is for a single family home. There's a slight different form, kind of looks like this for condos. But you have your subject property, you have the contract section, the neighborhood section, which the appraiser will explain what they think the neighborhood boundaries are. So that's pretty useful. Also, Andy will be happy to send this to you if you want to look over this after we're done. And if you have any further questions, you can email me or email her. But as you see, neighborhood section, the neighborhood boundaries, the subject neighborhood. But then below, this next slide is just the bottom half of that first page of the form. And what I want to show here is, can people see, Andy, can people see my cursor? Can everyone see my cursor? You can. Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay, good. So if you could see my cursor right here and you see that C3, this is where I was going to talk about the C ratings and the Q ratings. C stands for condition, Q stands for quality. So we're in the improvement section, the bottom of the first page of the appraisal report. And what we have here is what the appraiser's considering this home as a C3 condition. So Also, when you're completing that packet that you're going to hand to the appraiser, it's very important to have the information in there as far as kitchens and baths. The appraiser has to answer these questions. The kitchen, has it been remodeled or updated? Has it been updated or remodeled? And then the appraiser is going to have to answer the question, was it updated or remodeled in the last 12 months, in the last 1 to 5 years, or in the last 6 to 10 years? So if the kitchen has been remodeled or the bathrooms have been updated in the last, let's say 3 years ago, have that information in the packet for the appraiser, because this is actually a drop down that it looks like the appraiser's typing this out, but it's actually a drop down in the appraisal software where the appraiser has to answer these questions. So if the kitchen was remodeled in 2017, 3 years ago, they're going to put that in there, and I'll show you on the next slide why these ratings are important. So C3, so I'm going to go to the next slide here, and this is where we're going to spend most of the rest of our time. And I'm going to get this up on my other computer so that I can see the whole screen.
This is the meat of the report, right?
Yeah, this is it. When an agent or a loan officer asks me to review an appraisal report, this is the page I go to. There might be 45 pages in the appraisal report, but I'm going to, this is what we refer to as the grid page. So I know y'all can't see over here behind our faces, but what I have here is a list of the most important things that I look at in an appraisal report. So keep in mind that this appraisal was completed in June of last year. So it's about, oh, look at you. Look at you. There we go. So this appraisal was completed in June of last year. So keep in mind that these dates are, like, for instance, so the appraisal was completed in June. This comp was only 90 days old at the time. So the first thing I'm going to look at is, when I'm looking at appraisal, is how far away the proximity. So this is the subject. This would have been the subject address, and then comp 1, comp 2, and comp 3. So what I'm looking for first, I can tell the complexity of an assignment, the complexity of an appraisal, by how far away the comps are. So if all the comps are, let's say, 2, 3, 4 miles away, I know that this is probably a tough subjective appraisal report. But if all the comps are 0.05 or 0.1 miles away, I know that this home is in a probably likely a sizable subdivision with plenty of comps, because these two comps are obviously, you can tell by how far away they are from the subject property, they're both in the subject subdivision. So what I'm going to look at first is the market condition adjustments. So can I still scroll?
I think so. You should be able to.
It's just such a delay. I don't want to hit it too much and go through the rest of my secrets. So there's a form that's also in every appraisal called the 1004 market condition form. And it's not letting me scroll, Andy. Can you go 1? Nope. Up.
Oops, hold on. Sorry. Darn it. Okay.
If we can go to that one right there.
This one? There we go.
So that's the market conditions addendum. And a lot of lenders, a lot of AMCs don't require this form anymore because FHA stopped requiring it, and Fannie Mae, and I don't understand why. This is really good information. We still require it. Movement still requires it. And what it does is it tells you in the appraisal report, if the appraiser is using dated comps, so this comp is 3 months old at the time of the appraisal, but these other two comps are almost a year old. This one is a year old. So this appraiser used what's called market condition adjustments, or what a lot of people refer to as time adjustments. And so this comp is 90 days old, so there was a slight adjustment. But on the older comps, she made a much more sizable market condition adjustment based on this form. So what this form tells you, and again, in our appraisals, you'll see it in every single one, the prior 7 to 12 months, I hope you all have your magnifying glasses. This is the prior 7 to 12 month column right here. And what this row right here says is medium comparable sale price. So the medium comparable sale price at the time was $185,000 prior 7 to 12 months. Then prior 4 to 6 months, which is more recent, it was still the same. But over the last 90 days, this says current to 3 months, oh, it jumped to 199,000, and the appraiser marked increasing market. So the point of the story here is that if the appraiser is stating that this is an increasing market, and they're using dated comps, so this comp was 11 months old at the time, and this one was 12. So if we're in an increasing market and you don't see market condition adjustments here, and let's say the appraisal came in, 5,000 short or 10,000 short, that is an excellent aspect to point out in the rebuttal. Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Appraiser, you're using dated comps, you're stating this in increasing market, but you didn't make any adjustments there. So that's the point of that story right there. So now we're going to go on to what I said earlier is what so many people, it's just a huge oversight, is these quality and condition adjustments. So you see quality of construction here where the appraiser is using Q4. And then the condition adjustments, she's calling it C3. So C3 is basically the equivalent of good condition. C4 average, C5 fair, C6 cardboard box. Quality, or actually just very bad, poor condition. So the quality, Q4 is basically probably average quality. Q1 would probably be like Tiger Woods' house, most likely Q1, or most of the celebrities out there in California would be Q1, where every aspect of the home, every component of the home might be imported tile from Italy or something like that. And just every bell and whistle would be the quality. So that would be Q1. Q3 is good quality. Q4, like I said here, is probably average quality. Every appraisal report that y'all see should have these definitions embedded in it. It's a requirement. So when you see, when you've inspected those homes, or when you've seen those homes with your buyers, or when you're about to list a property and you went through the other listings and you see a comp in this appraisal report that the appraiser is stating is Q4, but you've been in that house and you're like, that's not a Q4 home, that is Q5 at best. Keep in mind that appraisers are using MLS photos for the most part to come up with these Q and C ratings. And as we all know, MLS photos can look awfully convincing that that house is in really, really good condition. Appraisers can get fooled too. So if you think that the appraiser is incorrect by calling comp number 1 Q4 and it's really Q5, and there should be a 10 or 20 or $50,000 adjustment depending on the price point we're in, then call that out in the rebuttal. That's where everyone just assumes that the appraiser is right when they're coming up with their quality and condition ratings. But oftentimes they're getting fooled by the MLS. Is there any questions on anything I've covered so far? Did I see one? No? Okay, great. So the next thing that's on here is what we call bracketing. You can see most of that behind our faces. So bracketing is not anything that you're going to see in our USPAP manuals that appraisers have to go by, but almost every lender wants to see bracketing. Almost every appraiser wants to bracket. So we're going to cover that, because what exactly is that? So bracketing is when we're going to take the gross living area, for instance, right here. So the gross living area, which is exactly the same as square footage, is 1,544 square feet for this particular property. So if the appraiser was not to bracket, all of these comps would either be smaller or all these comps would be larger than the subject property. And so the reason appraisers want to bracket is because they don't want to understate or overstate a value. So if all these comps were smaller, the appraiser could use a really, really large square footage, excuse me, I've got something in my throat. They would use a really, really small square footage and use a large square foot adjustment to overstate the value, or vice versa. So since comp number 1 and comp number 2 are larger than the subject property, and comp number 3 is smaller, what the appraiser's trying to do, if you see my cursor, these are the adjusted values down here. This is what the appraiser is using to reconcile reconcile their value, the adjusted values of the report. So the tighter these numbers are, the tighter the range, the more valuable that piece of paper, that appraisal is. If we had adjusted values of, let's say, 165,000 to 320,000, the reviewer is going to come back and say, this isn't worth the paper it's printed on. You're basically telling me this home is worth somewhere between 165,000 and 320,000. That's no good. So we want the tighter the range is here, the more convincing this appraisal report is going to be. So what we see a lot of times is, oh my goodness, the appraiser only used $40 a square foot. Generally speaking, the appraiser is going to use about 30 to 40% of what the price per square foot, which we see up here, 100. I know y'all are laughing at these out in California, but $124 a square foot, $120, $105, $135. So the appraiser is generally going to take about 30 to 40% of what this is, and that's the adjustment that they're going to make here. And so what we see a lot of times in a rebuttal is, oh my gosh, the appraiser only used $40 a square foot. Well, all right, let's use $200 a square foot. Well, if the appraiser is bracketing, we don't want them to in this particular case, because this is just going to drive these values down lower. And I can't tell you how many times I see where the rebuttal states, well, we want the appraiser to use a higher square footage adjustment than what they used. Well, oftentimes that's going to be a detriment. That's actually going to drive the value, the reconciled value, lower. So that's why appraisers bracket is so that they can show a nice tight range in whatever they're using, whether it's $20 a square foot, $100 a square foot, $200 a square foot in adjustments. They're just looking for a nice tight range and not overstating or understating the value. Are there any questions on that from anybody? All right, I think I explained that pretty thoroughly. So we're going to go to yes, ma'am.
Where is the price per square foot? I'm missing where that
Well, the price per square foot is automatically calculated in the software right up here. Can you see my cursor?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so the subject property, that's the contract price right there, 192,000.
Okay.
And so the price per square foot of the subject is 124, then 120. But what the appraiser is using is $40 a square foot. And you can calculate that by the difference between comp number one is 1655 square feet. The subject is 1544, and there's a $5,000 negative adjustment. So we can calculate that the appraiser in this particular case used $40 a square foot for the calculations of these. And this one's larger. And then the comp number 3 is actually smaller. So it received a positive adjustment, but the other two comps used a negative adjustment. So we wouldn't have wanted the appraiser to use any higher of an adjustment of $40 a square foot. If she had used $80 a square foot, these adjusted values would have come even lower.
Colin, I have a question.
How did it get up to-
Or just to clarify something.
I'm not clear.
Does a property that has multiple offers, do the multiple offers carry any weight? If I know around here, there's a strategy in some cases where a property, not to say it's underlisted, but it's listed low to drive traffic, and then all of a sudden it ends up in contract at $200,000 over list price. Do the amount of offers carry weight? Does the appraiser want to know that?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to tell the appraiser that you had multiple offers. What is more important, if there is multiple offers, is the days on market. To an appraiser, it doesn't make any sense if the home's on the market for 22 days if there were multiple offers. So if the home is only on the market for 1 or 2 days, that's more important to an appraiser than the multiple offers. I really used to encourage telling the appraiser that there were multiple offers back in the day, before the financial crisis even. We used to see a lot more inventory, at least in our side of the globe. We'd see a lot more inventory. And so it was typical for a home to be on the market for 100 days. Back then, I used to really encourage agents to tell appraisers when there were multiple offers, because there was inventory. So you tell the appraiser, well, we had multiple offers, and then there's 2 or 3 other homes for sale down the street, the appraiser would really have to bear down and be like, okay, why is this home getting multiple offers when there's other homes down the street that aren't getting any offers at all? So it was very, very important back then. Most of the time now, there's multiple offers because there's lack of options. There's just no inventory out there. Is that true? Is that true there too? There's just not a whole lot of inventory.
Yeah.
So remember my definition at the beginning of the slides. The definition of an appraisal is the most probable sale price. What the typical buyer, that's what the appraiser's job is what is the typical buyer going to offer for this home. So the only danger in telling appraisers that there is a multiple offer situation is that we don't want the appraiser to think that the homeowner is just taking the highest bidder, because what it's supposed to be, if you have 10 people look at the home and you get 3 offers out of those 10 showings, and you have, let's say, 400,000, 410,000, and 420,000 to choose from, those are the 3 offers. Well, most any seller is going to take the 420,000. I would, but what the appraiser has to consider is, okay, is 420 what the typical buyer is going to offer? Well, you had 7 people who looked at the home who didn't even give an offer, and then you have 3 offers and you're taking the highest one. What the appraiser is going to think is, okay, this is a market that commands that, and if we had the home on the market for any longer, would we get even higher offers? If the home is only on the market for 3 or 4 or 7 days, it's likely probably would have gotten even a higher offer than 420 if we left it on the market even longer. So that's what the agent, that's where you're going to make your commission, is judging how much do I want to tell the appraiser as far as, so obviously the days on market is huge. If the home is only on the market for a week and you've got multiple offers, yeah, sure, tell them. But if the home was on the market for 20 or 30 days and you're telling the appraiser that there's multiple offers, that's where it becomes a judgment call. Does that make sense?
Completely.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, good. Yep. Great. So one other reason why I actually chose this particular appraisal as my slide, while I continue to use it even though it's a year old, is I want to show the confusion, or what people really get confused about. You see this negative $7,000 adjustment on the condition ratings. So as I said before, the definitions of the Q ratings and the C ratings, it's Q1, Q2 up through Q6, and C1, C2 up through C6. And then there's definitions embedded in every appraisal report that you get, or they should be, they're required by Fannie Mae. So you have the definitions, but once the appraiser puts what they determine is the best description of that house, then the appraiser has to compare those homes to the subject property. So they're labeled by definition, but then they're compared. So it gets confusing where we see the subject property is a C3, comp 1 is a C3, comp 2 is a C3, but then comp number 3 is a C3, but there's a negative $7,000 adjustment. That must be a mistake. Well, it's not. What that most likely is the appraiser, comp number 3, either, let's say they either just had a new roof put on, or they just put in a brand new HVAC, and the appraiser is making an adjustment there for condition because the subject doesn't have that new roof or that new HVAC. So even though things like HVACs and roofs and other items, electrical, plumbing, even though those are upkeep items, they should be reflected in the condition of the home. So whenever someone tells you, oh, well, that's just maintenance of the home, sure, it might be maintenance of the home, but that's supposed to be reflected in the condition of the home. So what if our subject property had a brand new roof, and comp number 3 had the roof was 18 years old? Well, that should be a positive $7,000 adjustment then. Or if the subject property just had the whole home, they just redid all the electrical in the home, or they redid all the plumbing, or put in a new HVAC or something like that, by all means tell the appraiser about that. Or if you're in that comp number 3 home, and the appraiser should be explaining explaining in their report. Right below this grid is an area where the appraiser should be explaining their adjustments. And if they get really wordy, if they provide a lot of commentary, it's going to flip into a narrative addendum. And so you can see that, you can look through the report for the addendum as to why they made that $7,000 adjustment. And if they said, oh, because they just put a new roof on, well, I went to that house and that roof is 3 years old. So maybe they shouldn't be making that adjustment, and that would be something to put into the rebuttal. So I'm going to speed it up a little bit here because we're running into that hour. As far as comparables, when the appraiser searches for comps, what they're first going to start with, obviously, is their subdivision. They're going to search maybe the last 6 months in their subdivision. If there's no activity, they're probably going to go to 12 months in their subdivision. But if they do find, let's say you have very recent sales in the subdivision, and the subject property obviously is in that subdivision, it's going to take an act of Congress, and we know how awesome they are these days. It's going to take an act of Congress to get them to use anything outside of that subdivision. But if the appraiser, if there's not much activity in that subdivision, then the appraiser is probably going to go to, they're going to expand their search and maybe start with the school system. They might start with the elementary school in that area. And if they still don't find what they're looking for, they're going to go to that middle school or high school or the overall neighborhood. Remember, I showed on the first page of the actual form where the appraiser will spell out what they believe is the overall neighborhood. So use that to your advantage. If there's not a lot of activity in that area that is comparable to the subject property, use the appraiser's explanation of what they think the neighborhood boundaries are to your advantage. They're supposed to state what the northern boundary is, the eastern, the southern, and the western boundaries on the first page of the report. So use that in your search for neighborhood. So use those to your advantage. Any questions on that from anybody? I can't see everybody. So, so I always get asked, there's a lot of frequently asked questions. Do appraisers use FSBOs? Will the appraiser use a for sale by owner in their appraisal report? Only if they are extremely desperate. The reason for this is appraisers, again, they use MLS photos. They use MLS to see what the seller concessions are. They use those photos in MLS to show what the quality and condition, they try to determine the quality and the condition of the home and the repairs and the renovations of the home. When someone sells their home on their own, there's none of that. The appraiser doesn't know what the seller concessions are. They don't know if it's an arm's length transaction, and appraisers are only supposed to be using arm's length transactions in their appraisal reports. So if the home is supposed to be exposed on the market. So if it's for sale by owner, how was it exposed? If it even was exposed on the open market. So there's just too many uncertainties.
To the point on the for sale by owners, that also applies to off-market sales,
yes.
correct?
Yes, off-market sales. The appraiser is only supposed to use comps in their report that they can prove a lot of the information. So you'd probably need a HUD statement from the homeowner, which is very rare if the appraiser is going to use that for sale by owner as a comp. Off-market sales, iBuyers. That's a very difficult one too. The appraiser should probably only be using properties that are in MLS that have been sold on the open market, just like a typical arm's length. I'm having a real hard time with that today. Arm's length transaction. So the appraisers, it's rare. They got to be really desperate, not finding any comps in an area if they're going to use a FSBO. Another question I get all the time, why do appraisers need the purchase contract? In strong markets, you want them to have it. Fannie Mae determined a long time ago, one of the appraiser's jobs is to analyze the contract, but you want them to have it because what we see at Karis, most of our rebuttals are not on purchases, they're on refis, because appraisers aren't going to push on a refi because they don't frankly know the value that the homeowner needs in order to make that deal work, in order to make that refi work. But a good appraiser is going to take the purchase contract as one test of market value, because you have a willing buyer, a willing seller acting in their own best interest, hopefully, signing a legal document. So a good appraiser is going to take that contract as, let's say that contract is $500,000, and the appraiser, without pushing, is coming in at about 493, 494. I've even had USPAP instructors tell us in continuing ed classes, if you're within 2 or 3% of a value without pushing, you should probably go ahead and just get it, because the real estate market is it's a living, breathing thing, and it moves up and down and around, and you're just not good enough to come in at 495 when you have a $500,000 contract. So that's the other question that I get a lot that relates to that is, how come my appraisals always come in on the contract price? Well, that same appraiser who might push that value from, let's say, 494 to 500,000, they could also probably, on the flip side, let's say they could probably get 505 or 507 on that $500,000 contract. Well, again, they have that legal document signed by a willing buyer, willing seller. That's one test to market value. Okay, well, I could probably get 505, but I have this contract in front of me that says 500, so I guess I'll just come in at 500. So that's why so often you might see your appraisals come in right on the contract price, because they might be pushing or they might be conservative, but they're taking that contract price, that contract they're taking it seriously. So yeah, any other questions we might have about any of these? Anybody see anything that sticks out? I talked about the tax record square footage. Really, we want it done by a professional if we're going to argue the appraiser on their square footage measurements. Any others on here? So this is the end of my presentation. I skipped over a few things because we were running out of time, technical issues. But if there are any questions about this presentation, if Andy wants to give it to y'all and you look through it, or if you have any specific questions that you want to talk about on your appraisals that you've seen recently, I'd be happy to help with that. You can email me. Andy has my phone number, my cell phone, and she can give that out. Feel free to ask her or myself any questions. I appreciate Andy inviting me today. I like talking about appraisals. I've been doing it a long time. I like to help out anytime I can to try to solve the mystery of appraisals and appraisers.
Thank you, Colin. Thanks, Andy. Andy, you're gonna send the spreadsheet out and around? I mean,
Yeah, I'll send everybody the PowerPoint. And then, if anybody has any questions or anything, I say it all the time, I'm happy to be a resource, and Colin very generously offered to also offer his help. So if you guys need anything on listings or buyers that are submitting offers and you have questions about any of it, just holler. So
thank you.
I appreciate it, Colin. Thanks everybody for coming. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Someday.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Colin.
All right, y'all have a wonderful day. Let me know if you need anything, Andy. I'm always happy to help if I can.
Thanks, Colin. I appreciate it.
All right, everyone take care.
Bye, everybody.